Good evening, or welcome to episode 39 of Property Avenue WA. I'm TV, he's Oscar D'Souza. Oh my God, what a week. To think this time last week it was Australia Day. And here we are today, Tuesday, the 2nd of February, and the world's gone upside down in WA. It's quite amazing, but we'll talk more about that. OD, welcome. Good to see you. Going to have a little chat tonight with regard to a number of things, and of course, more particularly, as our title suggests, the devastation and, of course, the disruption of our property world and our world, to be honest, here in WA, with regard to bushfires, with regard to COVID lockdowns, with regard to cyclone issues up north. It's been just crazy. So we're going to have a little chat about that and also what impact that has on us. We've got our guest tonight, Dean Stonehouse. Not only a guest, he's a friend. So we got Dino on there because there was a headline during the week, in fact, yesterday, that took my fancy. I was interested in the stats, so we thought, why not get Dino on board? Last minute call up, which was very kind and very generous with his time. So we're going to have a chat to him. And also a couple other things about the finance brokers as to the turnaround times that it's taking with regard to settlement and the processes. I've got a little rant, and it's probably why we do Property Avenue WA, but I'll tell you more about that shortly. The WA state election, there's a few things that have been, I've noted that there's been suggestion of a few key points that the Real Estate Institute would like to see happen, a few reforms. And there's a few other things being going, so we might discuss that. Also, can I let you know, we have a Property Avenue WA has a Instagram page and we have a Facebook page. And now, as of tonight, we now have, you can subscribe and not have to watch us. You can listen to us by podcast. So it's available on Apple. And if you go to our Facebook page, Property Avenue WA, or the Champion Bay Settlements Facebook page, or our Instagram page, you will see the link, and you will be able to subscribe to our podcast, which will be available. I've got a young friend of mine whose name we won't mention. I don't want to embarrass him, but he's going to edit it all after our show each Tuesday night, and it will be available the following morning, being Wednesday. So that's our podcast, which we're quite excited about. And it will shortly be available, fingers crossed, via Spotify. It'll be available through Google, and it'll be available through Amazon Music. So watch this space. So we're going places, boys and girls. And then the other thing being is that interesting little definition with regard to COVID and essential businesses. And it was intriguing. There's been a little bit of toing and froing in our profession. And I'll speak to Oscar about this again later, and Dino. But the conveyancing profession, the settlement agents are not considered essential, and nor are removalists. So what impact that has on the settlement and those people that are perhaps running around with anticipation, expecting to move into their homes over the coming days and, in fact, the coming weeks. So more about that. Oscar, hi. Great to see you, mate.
TV, good evening, and good evening to Dean and to anyone that is watching this evening or listening as and when people get the opportunity to listen. But first and foremost, mate, the devastation that we've seen in the last couple of days, real estate aside, COVID aside even, the devastation that we're seeing in the Eastern Hills side of Perth, just basically on the fringe of the Perth metropolitan area. It's absolutely devastating. Our thoughts, our prayers, and every single thing that we've got that goes out to those families that are impacted, those families that have lost homes, those families that have to vacate or evacuate the area, I should say. It's a really, really tough, very, very tough situation out there. And, I guess we need that like a hole in the head, as does the frontline people that are fighting the fires. But we've got to acknowledge what's going on out there because, and like you said, Australia Day was only a week ago, and I think we were basking in our WA glory of how wonderful it is to be Australian, to be West Australian, and to live in WA, but how quickly things can turn where It's not that WA is not a great place to live, because obviously it is, but things just aren't as great as what they were 7 days ago. So, or not even 3 days ago. So, yeah, mate, I'm good. I'm good. I've got no problems in the world compared to some of the people, I guess, that I just mentioned. Very, very interesting time in real estate as well. And I'm really keen to hear what Dino has to say so far as what's going on in the mortgage broking world. Who are the borrowers? What sort of money are they borrowing? Interest rate decision today from the Reserve Bank as well, and some interesting comments made by the Reserve Bank governor as to what the future is over the next 2 to 3 years. So, and that is, I think we're unlikely to see an interest rate rise at all. So, yeah, we've got a pretty amazing world that we've got at the moment, and I look forward to the next 40 minutes of talking it through with yourself and Dean.
Hey, well, without further ado, he's abound, so I think we should bring him on board. Dino, welcome, mate, and thanks for your time, especially last minute.
Hey,
good welcome. To see you. Good to see you.
Likewise, thank you.
Yeah, and we were just saying, and obviously you heard us with regard to the bushfires and cyclones up north, or at least threats of cyclones, which this time of the year is not uncommon. And then, of course, here we are on Sunday. Well, certainly in our case, and I'm sure there's a few other people I know who are similar, we were packing our bag and going to head down south and have a leisurely week and try and catch up on, try and recharge the batteries, because the last year or two for us personally and business-wise has been fairly hectic. And we thought, well, let's take the opportunity to have some R&R. And the second time in less than 12 months, COVID hit us between the eyes. Suddenly we get a phone call. We're, what the hell's going on here? So,
hey, Dino, when did you get back from South Africa, Dino?
I was going to make a comment, but I won't.
Yeah. Oh, he's a sharp.
This week I'm working from the not in my study, not in my home office. So okay. It's all right. Yeah.
So he's working away.
Just don't drink and look at the picture at the same time.
and he's been busy this week because he's skinned a zebra.
Correct. Yeah. Do they have black stripes or white stripes? That's the question, isn't it?
Listen, just while we're on about the bushfire in particular, I mean, I just find that, ironically, we were talking about this two or three episodes ago, I reckon, about bushfires, because there was an issue going on, remember, down near Kwinana Way, and it was pretty devastating. And we sort of made comment about the impact that has on landlords and the responsibilities, etc. But I just had a look before we went on air, and 59 homes. So in the space of about, I don't know, probably an hour, 2 hours, it's gone from something like, I think I read it was about 50, and now it's down up to 59 and counting. So 59 homes have been confirmed lost. And that those people, you could never understand what that must be like. That the devastation. It must be quite incredible.
Yeah, I this afternoon, I was lucky I managed to get a hold of one of my clients. He actually has a home in, I don't know if I pronounce it right, Marunga, which is on the eastern side of the fires.
Yep.
And he's a FIFO worker, currently trying to get back from work. He's got his family living in his house, and he was telling me the fires are basically over the hill. So he's looking at hopefully being home tomorrow, if he can get from the airport out to his house, to make sure everything's fine. And just absolutely wished him the luck, and hopefully his family remains safe for the night. But it's good, devastating news this afternoon.
Yeah, well, my son who lives, they just moved into their new home a couple of days before Christmas. We were able to somehow get settlement happening before then, and they were only out there on Saturday afternoon. And he contacted us this morning to say that they were contacted and be ready to evacuate last night. This is like 1:30 in the morning. And so there was obviously huge concerns and worry, and as parents we worry. But I mean, there was another issue there. You talk about new homes, but there was there was an article I read on the ABC News online, and where one couple and their children, they basically had a new home. They only got last year, and it's just been burnt to the ground.
Wow.
And there's a photo of that, and you just look at that. And I know I posted some bushfire photos when I did our broadcast on our channels, but you need to be careful. I suppose I was really conscious of the fact that we weren't trying to glorify it, but just perhaps highlight, as I said in our headline, the devastation and the impact not only it's got on people, but also the property world. That those people, that's not just a house, that's their home, and everything that goes with it. And it's.
I think the other thing, TV, as well, that you just touched on, that it's much more than a house. And everyone's got a house, or lots of people, most people have got a house and they've got a home. But out there, and I've seen a lot of the properties out there just through my evaluation days. It's a lifestyle. People choose to live out there because it offers something that the city suburbs just don't offer. And then there's animals. The other lifestyle stuff, there's a lot of businesses out there as well. So it's not a 4x2 house that's 10 years old or something that, well, that's okay. They can just grab another one, in 6 months' time. When something goes out there, you're probably not going to find another one. So, really do feel for the folk out there.
Oh, yeah. I suppose the thing is, we have a few followers, and people may not be listening now, but listening later on. And Dino, as you're aware, we've now got a podcast, and that will go live to that'll be available tomorrow. So this is our first, other than a stream, this will be converted to, the audio will be converted to a podcast. So you're our first guest. You're our first podcast guest.
And you're going live around the world.
Yes. But I suppose the question I ask is, I wonder if someone's got any thoughts out there how we can help. Is there some way, some small way that we may be able to, as a community, when I say a community, the Property Avenue WA community, what is it that we may be able to do as a community with regard to those people? I mean, we always talk about it, but what can we actually do? Is there something that we can actually do to be helpful? So happy to hear your thoughts. And if you've got any ideas, then there's some options up there via our live chat line or our Instagram page, or, of course, Messenger. But what can we do? What is it that we can do that perhaps might be able to help families that have been through this devastation and pretty much have nothing? When you have a look at these photos, pretty much have nothing. So, mate, Dean, Oscar, with regard to this sort of thing, what happens in a situation where those properties, for example, is a rental property? What happens to the tenants, and what's the responsibilities and the situation with the landlord? The landlord's not only lost his investment property, but the tenants lost their home that they're living in and their belongings. What happens there?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it's not too common that something like that happens, and certainly not out that neck of the woods. But I'm pretty certain that if there is a fire that results in total destruction, and therefore the place is not habitable anymore, I'm pretty sure that lease comes to an immediate end, which is exactly the same that if someone was in a property and if the single tenant passed away, then that lease actually comes to an immediate end. So I dare say, in this sort of a situation, if the property's not there anymore, a tenant can't be held to that lease. So far as the damage to the tenant's belongings, so far as the damage to the property or the complete devastation of the property, normal insurance, so the landlord would be required to have their own building insurance. Not all landlords do, but it would fall on the landlord's insurance. And interestingly, the tenant's belongings, the inside, so the contents, all their TVs and couches and their own personal belongings, they actually need to have their own contents insurance for that.
And
Dino, what about in a finance perspective? What happens there?
Yeah, so usually the first thing suggested is for owners of the property to reach out to their lender. Most lenders will have a hardship team in place, particularly because of COVID as well. So you can reach out through to them, talk to their relationship manager, talk through if they're dealing with a broker, contact their broker, who can also put them in touch in the right department within the lender. And basically then the lender will then step through in regards to a compassion sort of basis relating to their loans and repayments, etc. So, yeah, they're big supporters of that sort of side, trying to help them through.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you look at what happened, this time last year, as you will recall, those bushfires and the devastation over east was just mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. And, of course, there was a huge amount of fundraising done and a huge amount of work done, but there is still people 12 months later who, as much as there was lots of money raised and lots of things done, and I think there's been a bit of a toing and froing with regard to that and how it's been distributed and not distributed in some cases. But, 12 months later, some of those people, a lot of those people from what I've observed, because I've sort of kept a bit of a tab of it, are still not have a home, still not had their place rebuilt. Sure, some have, but there's a lot that still are going through recovery, not just obviously mental recovery, but also physically with regard to their asset and their home. So it's not just a 5-minute wonder, is it?
One of the things we also find is quite often, and when we're talking about examples like today, people have lost their homes, but they're actually losing their paperwork. They're losing copies of their identification. They've lost photocopies of their insurance documents and things like that. And quite often it brings us back to the forefront to think about how we could keep a separate copy, a scanned image, have it on a computer, have it on a hard drive, have it stored somewhere, whether it's in the cloud. I know it's not easy to think and talk about, particularly what people have gone through today, but as part of their preparation for an emergency, of knowing that where they've got access to this important paperwork, where they've got access so they can actually prove things. Because the first thing you find out quite often is they'll walk in somewhere and they'll go, well, I need to prove who you are, and they've got no ID. And it just slows the process down. So thinking about having that as an emergency of where do they keep a copy of your paperwork. Quite often you get told that when you travel overseas, the first thing you get told is keep a photocopy of your passport. If something goes wrong and you lose your passport, keep a photocopy of the page which has got the visa stamp on it, for example, so you can prove how you got in the country. But this is more on the home front. And I know some of my clients and some of my family, some of my friends actually keep a little portable safe, a little small ones. You can go down to Bunnings. They cost $70 or $80. They're fire rated usually for 45 minutes or so, but they put some of the important documents in there. So if you need to quickly get up and run, you can physically grab that, take your photos, whatever it needs to be, take your pet, but get out of there. The main thing is, just keep your life happy. But that's a suggestion from a banking viewpoint, is if you can somehow keep copies of your paperwork separate to where you live. Yep.
It's interesting you say that. I can recall an incident some years ago, in fact, nearly 40 years ago, where I was down at when we used to have our office in Kearns Crescent in Applecross there, and I was down at, I think it was one of the building societies, whether it was Perth Building Society back then or whatever, at Garden City, and I went in there, and there was this lady and this young guy who were trying to open up an account, and he just had cash, and I was sitting there waiting to see someone regarding a client's finance application. And anyway, they couldn't open. They were then trying to say that he needed some ID. And what had happened was that this young guy had been in a fire, and he only had the clothes he had on, and he had this cash that people had donated to him to help him on his way. And he wanted to go and bank it, of course. But of course, it was at a time when I think ID and whatever was starting to be introduced. And I, in the end, sort of said, look, you must be able to, I sort of interrupted. I couldn't help myself in the end to say, look, someone must be able to do something here. And I ended up speaking to the manager, who then sorted it. But it was just quite disturbing that this young bloke was going through, and you could see he was going through quite an emotional roller coaster. And then, of course, all this red tape that this bloke had to then address with regard to ID, which he just simply didn't have. And they were having difficulties trying to explain that. And so it's like exactly what you're talking about now, Dino. You forget it's not just the house, but it's everything, all those other important things, be it driver's licenses and insurance papers and all these other important documents.
Yeah, and 20 years on, it's harder to open a bank account than it was. So,
well, that's my point. That's exactly my point. You know, that was those days when it's not quite it wasn't quite as stringent as it is now. So, and you're able to sort of talk to the manager. They knew me. I mean, I didn't know this person, but I said, you know, I think we need to help this guy. You know, you could tell that he was quite distraught, and yeah, and there's a lot of stress. So, but the good thing is, I suppose, when you look at the positives with all this, there has, at this point in time, there's been no loss of life, and at the end of the day, that's what's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so thank you. I appreciate that. Hey, listen, the reason we got you on board as well is that there was a very interesting article that I noticed, a headline, in fact, in the paper yesterday. And it wasn't a major article, but it was one that I picked up in the West Australian. And it was broker boom as homeowners avoid banks to get best rates, to get the best rate. And it was all about the fact that borrowers are now eager to refinance the home loan this year, but many are picky about who they seek help from. And so they were talking about the fact that mortgage brokers had a statutory obligation to act in the best interest of consumers, which means they must prioritise consumers' interests when helping apply for credit. But new independent research conducted on behalf of Mortgage Choice quizzed about 1,000 Australians, including first home buyers and existing borrowers, and found just over half are reluctant to speak to a bank for refinancing and are going to mortgage brokers instead. And then there was another article I found. In fact, I found where mortgage brokers got to new heights where over 60% of all new home loans written by brokers have been written by brokers throughout Australia over the last 12 months. That's unbelievable, Dino.
Yeah, it's been a progress. It's been something that's been happening over many years. It's not something new, but what you find is over the last 15 or 20 years, going back when mortgage broking really come to play, is people have been looking at that choice between going directly to their lender and actually going to a broker. And for whatever reasons they choose, many are choosing because of the choice they have in the lenders. It saves them the time having to run around to find out who's got the best rates, but also to understand who has policies and terms and conditions that aligns and matches their personal needs, because not each lender provides the same amount of borrowing and not each lender has the same appetite for each transaction. Some specialise in different areas. So that's the benefit of what's really come out of a mortgage broker versus just going direct to a lender. It's always been hovering, the last 18 months or so, it's been hovering around the high 50s, mid to high 50%, so 55 to 60%. But again, in the last 6 months, particularly as people have found they've gone out of work, they've been impacted by COVID, their income's been reduced ongoing, they might have a different job, their bills, their expenses are consistently rising. As you know, we're all doing it, we're all seeing what it costs to go and buy groceries at the shop. There's just this pressure between rising costs, and we've had such a long stability in income with very little growth. And people are just feeling like they're getting squeezed. So they're looking at their main bills that they have as living expenses, and that could be whether they're paying rent, whether they're paying a mortgage, and whether they're paying their telephone bill. They're all looking at how can I actually get by. I think there was the Reserve Bank, for example. If you go to the Reserve Bank website, and I think, Tony, I may have given you the link on this one that you can pop in for everybody to have a look at. The Reserve Bank's now, well, has been for a while, it shows to the public the difference between what the average interest rate is for existing loans for owner-occupied and what is the average new loan interest rate for owner-occupied loans. And there's a differential, I think the last month from December, there's a differential of about 35 to 40 points. So what we generally find is the banks haven't been as willing or wishing to actually provide an ongoing discount to the existing person, to the existing client, but have been providing entitlements, enticements, cashback offers, better interest rates to allow them to bring in a new customer. So the new customer is getting a better deal than an existing customer who potentially has some loyalty to that lender. And this is where your clients are taking on the broker to go, hey, I need to save money. I've been told there's interest rates, for example, in the 2s for an owner-occupied P&I rate. Why am I still paying 3 point something? And that's where the savings are coming from. And I think this is going to continue. I don't think it's going to go away. If I give you a quick example, I've got a client currently who's a long-term customer of one of the banks. He's currently principal interest, owner-occupied rate. He's paying in the 3s. He's come to me and says, Dean, I need to reduce my cash flow. I need to get better rates. I know this is just his example, so it might not reflect for everybody else, but we're currently putting him into a restructure where we've got him under owner-occupied with a 2, and he's saved about $9,000 in a year in repayments by his interest rate change. Now,
Wow.
that's an example. It might not apply to everybody. Everybody's circumstance is going to be different.
The other thing that I think, Dean, and I'm talking from a consumer's point of view as well, I mean, my business is 100% about relationships with people, and I guess to a lesser extent, it's actually about real estate. So I really think as a consumer, if I'm one of the big problems that I have in terms of being the consumer, and when I'm dealing with any of the big organisations, be it the big banks, be it the big health funds, or be it the big telecommunication companies, is you just don't feel like you've got the relationship with that person anymore. You can't get them on the phone, albeit that you said that you couldn't get me on the phone yesterday at lunchtime and didn't leave a message. But, but if you had left a message...
He does not let up, mate. He just goes on and on and on.
If you had left a message, Dino, I would have given you a call back. And
what stays offline comes online. I understand that now.
But anyway, it's the relationship with the person, and I would think as a consumer, if I'm trying to get in touch with someone at the bank to talk about my home loan, the different things that I have to go through and the hoops I have to jump through, let alone, or alternatively, I can ring you, I can ring another broker who's actually personally known to me, who can get everything that they need from me, and then go and do the work for me, and then come back to me, and it's just more of a personal relationship, and I think that really works in the favour of a mortgage broker such as yourself.
Yeah, I agree, but I'll also stand up for my friends and colleagues in lending, and Tony is also in a previous life an ex-banker, and he probably would have realised and understood. And before me being a broker,
and a finance broker. My apologies.
And
remember too, it's funny when you talk about the industry. Remember when we first started, the industry was basically non-existent. We were knocking on the doors of banks. I spent more time knocking on the doors of banks to get them to understand what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And then then some people came into the industry after us and said, "Oh, this alone will do. We'll just make money while the sun shines, because this will only last for 2 years." And here we are now, some 35 years later. So it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So on the back of that, what I was going to say is there's some brilliant bankers out there. There's some really good branch managers and lending managers are out there. And even if you go back 20 years or 30 years, banks didn't like it when they moved their staff from one branch to the other. The customers would follow their branch manager or their lending manager because they had the relationship, they understood who they were, and the banks really didn't like it because they always had customers moving and migrating between branches. And there's still great there. It's trying to find a relationship. It's all about finding the person that you can relate to and who understands your business or understands your affairs, and you build that rapport and trust for them to take you through the journey. It's no different to being a doctor.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I caught up with Jody Bevan last week from Bendigo in Geraldton, and I'll declare the fact that he's one of my best mates. But it's interesting. We were talking, other than some social aspects, we were also talking work, and they can't keep up with regard to what's going on with home loan applications, etc. I know I haven't spoken to Jenny Addison of late, but she's got the Bank of Queensland, similar situation, Dino, with what you're talking about. It's to do with relationships, and they're just two people that I know that people follow them because of who they are and what they are and how they conduct themselves.
Yeah. Well, Jenny Addison's been in the same role for 10 to 15 years. She runs her own business. She's got her heart into her business. And there's an example as a lender. But the thing is that's unique is there's not a lot of them around. So most lenders are employees who get moved. So that's where it's been a benefit for a broker.
Yeah. Hey, the other thing, Dino, with regard to while we've got you, which has been a bit of an interesting point, I know you and I have discussed it, both with clients mutual clients we've got, and also just in general. But the turnaround times, I mean, it's very difficult to tell people. And I know with regard to the settlement side of things, I've spoken to not just our staff but clients. The turnaround times, I've had situations raised with me when I've spoken to different bankers and people, and as I said, people like yourself included. The turnaround, the time frames for applications in this marketplace at the moment is just extreme. It creates a lot of anxiety, a lot of pressure on everybody, not just the client, but also the broker and the banker and everybody else that's involved. Where is that at the moment? What's your experience with that at the present time?
It's not a problem. No, I'm only joking, as you know. Oh my God! Oh my God! And by the way, guys, this is water. It's not vodka.
There's only one comedian allowed on this show, mate. One comedian.
And that's Tony.
No.
Guys, it is something that we spend hours on every day. As a mortgage broker, it's become a major issue, and to the point that the association bodies for mortgage brokers, whether it's FBAA or MFAA, have taken this on and raised it to government bodies, to the major banks and lenders of what is going on. Because as being the person in the middle, and you've got a customer on one hand and a lender on the such, and they're telling you, oh yeah, we'll look at your file the next day, and there's no guarantees, and it just blows out. It's become unbearable. So, look, if I take it back a step and explain where it's come from, this is almost like a perfect storm. We've had a Royal Banking Commission into how banks need to behave in regards to responsible lending. We've had COVID come in, which then moved all the staff across to dealing with hardship. So they pulled staff off the front line because no one wanted to do a home loan April last year, and the market stopped. We get to June and July, and the government within hours announced new grants, new incentives to build, to buy, stamp duty savings, all sorts of these benefits to get people back into the market. And there's been a boom in new home loan writing and not enough staff to actually do the job.
Yeah.
There's been probably errors made by banks, there's probably been errors made by some mortgage brokers in doing work, and everything's just compounded. And it's taking some time. So I'll give an example. At the moment, I've got a client in Sydney who wants to go to auction Saturday next week. He's about to put his application with me. He's a little bit unique because he's actually he's a lawyer, so he's got a less than 20% deposit, so he needs mortgage insurance. But some lenders, because of the type of category of who he works for, there's a lawyer and a medical practitioner, etc., they may get some benefits to have mortgage insurance waived. In the whole of Australia, I've got access to about 26 or 27 lenders. I found 2 lenders that will waive his mortgage insurance. One has an interest rate mid-threes. Another one has a normal interest rate with like a 2. If I lodge his application tomorrow morning, they're taking 11 to 17 working days to pick his file up.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that's not unusual. So
Just
2
to
to
pick
3
it up.
weeks just to pick it up. So it's not guaranteed it's going to get approved in 11, 17 days. They've still got to go through validations. They still want to ask a question. So I've basically had to say to this person, if you want to go out and buy a house, you want the security and the certainty that you've got pre-approval in place. It's going to take me up to 4 weeks. I've got to say 3 weeks plus to give them the confidence, because he wants to go to an auction.
Yep. And
Now,
this is what
they're actually working 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, but they've got different criteria. And this, he's going to try and save almost $10,000 in mortgage insurance.
And this is what we keep saying with regard to contracts. When we get contracts and we speak to clients, we speak to agents, and go, look, you've got to be realistic. You know, the time frames, because you even look, I know we're talking about WA property, but I keep a tab of what's going on elsewhere, and it's busy everywhere in Australia at the moment with finance and home borrowings and home buying. So that, and because the banks now have centralised systems, it's not just someone looking after WA as such, it just goes in the pool.
One of the things that's interesting, and it's beneficial to a client, because some lenders are providing cashback incentives to refinance or get your new deal, particularly refinance from one organisation to another. But these are the same organisations that have a queue so long that it takes, I think in the article you're referring to, Tony, refers to the article yesterday, that person was suggesting 4 to 6 weeks time frame to do a refinance.
Yep.
And that's not unrealistic. So if the client goes, I need to settle, rate is important, but not the criteria. We can find lenders that can settle quicker, but is it in the client's best interest to do so? And it's my duty to show to the client by going, if you wish to wait 2 or 3 weeks, I can get you a better rate. So,
Yep.
Tony, I'm guessing you're seeing the same, you're seeing the frustrations from the settlement side of expectations of what would be normal going, hey, allow 3 to 4 weeks from like signing an offer to settlement, and all of a sudden that's not normal.
Well, I know when COVID occurred last year, when it first sort of entered our world, I contacted bankers and finance brokers and whatever, and said, okay, what do you expect as the time frame? At that point in time, I would suggest 42 days for finance approval on a contract.
Wow. That's
right?
probably realistic now. Unfortunately, I shouldn't smile, but yeah.
That was at the time when COVID, back in March, just after March, April.
Yep.
And everyone said to me, "You're mad." I said, well, I'm only relying on what I've been told. And now that's not unrealistic.
Yeah.
So we need to be conscious of it.
The thing is, it's been improving.
Do you see it improving?
The article that I saw from the Mortgage and Finance Association of Australia had this on their agenda as a very important item. They're already addressing it with the lenders. They're in discussion with the lenders. They're in discussions with the government, because they're saying you want the ability for people to make it easy to do a refinance to save money, but it's too slow and cumbersome. So will it improve? Yes, it will. And I'm seeing and hearing where banks are bringing on more staff, more experience, looking at processes to get on top of it.
I think one of the things as well that we're seeing directly in the real estate market, because properties are selling very, very quickly, often within the first week or at the first home open, they're going under offer, and people are missing out on properties. So by the time they get to their second or third property, they're wanting to have a really, really strong offer, not just in the price they're willing to pay, but finance, the strength of their finance condition, the shorter time frame, the lower risk or the lower loan all that actually impacts on the total strength of the offer. So I think obviously real estate agents need to be aware of what you guys are talking about so far as irrespective of what it says on the contract, they're putting the deal in jeopardy if they're unrealistic with their timeframes with 21-day finances or 28-day finances, but not just the real estate agents. I think the sellers need to be made aware of it as well, that if they see a 21 or a 28-day finance or a 30-day finance, that they need to be asking the question of the buyer, of the real estate agent, or anyone that they can as to how realistic is that, because it's more than likely going to be longer than that. And if they're not prepared to offer an extension on finance, then what's the point of getting? I mean, they're going to sell the property anyway. That's the benefit that they've got at the moment, and they might actually even get a little bit more. But it'll save everyone a lot of pain if that condition is realistic to start with. But then the balancing side is, well, if you put 45 days on an offer, if a buyer puts 45 days and someone is less realistic with their finance condition, and that overall offer is attractive to the seller or to the real estate agent, and the buyer misses out because they were realistic with their finance condition, some buyers are not prepared to keep missing out. So it's a tough one.
Yeah, I'm not here to give advice about what people should do to win a deal at that settle at a property, whether it's an auction or whether it's open negotiation or something like that. That's their strategies, and I leave that for a buyer's advocate or somebody who's authorised to do so. The question really needs to go is, somebody's going to put an offer for finance. You're right. The question needs to be asked is, how realistic is that? And it varies from lender to lender. It's not. Every lender is not taking 20, 30 days to get finance done. There's lenders out there are turning around and producing results in 2 days, 3 days, 5 days. But they're not the lenders that got cash specials.
Yep.
They might not have a fixed rate with a 1 in the front of it. They might be starting with a 2. So the client needs to make those decisions about what's the best deal for me.
Yeah.
Hey, can I change a bit of direction? The Oscar, I wouldn't mind. You've been sitting there doing very little tonight. What's the week? Yeah, I know. What's the week that was? What's been going on there with regard to? Well, 2 weeks really, because of Australia Day. And then someone got a year older last week, so it sort of mucked our week up a little bit. And then, so what's been happening?
How many
What was that?
How many home opens this week? Zilch.
Oh, yeah, zilch. Yeah, well, look, I mean, in terms of next week's stats, if we do a show next week, we may as well not worry about the stats, because so far as home opens or properties that have been leased and properties that have been sold, we can expect those numbers definitely to be down, just because people haven't been able to get through properties to see them and make offers. So I dare say.
Sorry, just while you were saying that. So what happens there? We've got COVID, we've got lockdown. We've talked about the bushfires. What happens there? What's been happening this week? Real estate can't operate as such. So what happens with tenants and rentals and renewals, and so it goes?
Everything, the whole lot goes on ice. So on day 1 of lockdown, so we're only on day 2, but on day 1 of lockdown, we just basically weren't allowed to come into contact with anyone, which meant that we can't go through and do inspections. We certainly can't do home opens. We can't have any contact with everyone, but we're still allowed to, it's business as usual, but basically working from home. But then those goalposts have actually been shifted a day later, that basically real estate people are not an essential service, whether it's property management or sales. So we're not basically allowed to do anything at all. There's no inspections. If we went to do a final bond inspection at a property, knowing that the tenant's already moved out, technically we're not allowed to do that. Technically, we're not even supposed to be manning our offices and handing over keys, because of the possibility that, COVID could be passed on just having that transfer of keys. So we've basically been put on ice for the entire week. So it's going to be a very quiet week so far as activity is concerned. Properties, I still think you'll see properties selling, because those properties can sell if people have already seen them over the last couple of weeks. Some real estate agents have got very good video tours and Matterport tours as well. So I still think that you'll see a bit of action in the sales market, but certainly the numbers will be well down so far as the rental market's concerned. That said, 2 days ago, if we consider the stats where they were like just a few days ago before this lockdown, look, we've still got a really strong sales market and rental market. So last week's sales, 776 sales in the Perth metro area. 12 months ago, just over 540 sales. And 540 would have been considered a normal market and starting to gain a bit of momentum. 776 is certainly a lot, but also down from the 800 to 1,000 that we've seen a lot over the last 6 months. So supply is pretty low in terms of the listings. It's just a touch over 8,000. And 12 months ago, it was at about 12,500. So that's a real massive drop in supply that we've got. And any real estate agent will tell you at the moment they just haven't got enough stock for the buyer inquiry that's out there. So still a very strong market. Rental market, look, I called it a couple of weeks ago, or I think right at the start of January and maybe even around Christmas time, that I sensed that the rental market's probably tapering off a little bit. And we had a couple of hiccup weeks, but I really think that is the case. It doesn't mean that there's a lot of rental properties around. I'm not suggesting that, but I just think that we're starting to stabilise a bit, and we've got a consistent level of demand for just about any rental property that comes onto the market. But a lot of that absolute sting, I think, has gone out of it. But it's going to be a very interesting variable as to what happens in 5 weeks' time. 5 weeks? No, sorry, 7 to 8 weeks' time at the end of the rental moratorium. And that's where I think we're actually going to see a bit of a shift in the rental market again, because at that point in time, tenants that have not been paying their rent at this stage, real estate agents are allowed to take action against those tenants, and that may result in evictions. The other thing is that over this emergency period, we haven't been able to increase rents in line with the market rent. So there's a lot of rentals that are out there currently that are probably below where the current market is at. And from the 29th of March, we're actually allowed to have those rental prices increase in line with market. So I think that's actually going to see a bit of a shift in the market. So overall, I think, both markets, don't get me wrong, are still very, very strong. But I think that we're actually seeing a bit of a taper off. So far as this week of lockdown is concerned, if our last lockdown in April last year, or March, whenever it was, if that's anything to go by, I think we'll probably, if the green light goes back on next week, I think we probably see a bit of spring in the step. There'll be a bit of pent-up demand, both in the sales and rental market. But overall, I think that we're probably stabilising, levelling off a bit.
Okay. Yep. I mean, the prediction... Sorry, mate. Okay, Dino, go. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So if you feel that obviously with the moratorium finishing in April, at what point can landlords start giving notice to their tenants that they're talking about vacating? Do they still need to give them the 4 week notice?
Sorry, you cut out with what number did you say in terms of the days?
Is it 4 weeks? Do you still need to give them like 4 weeks notice, or how many weeks notice? If they're not going to let them to renew?
Is that for an eviction or a termination of lease, or are you talking about a rental increase?
Well, I'm talking about, you're suggesting potentially that there could be a number of people who may be asked to vacate the premises because they've been behind in the rent for various reasons.
Yep.
So even though the lease is ending, either party has to provide notice, don't they? So is that
correct?
So still got to provide like for 2 weeks or the 4 weeks notice.
Correct. Yeah, but what's happened is any of those evictions are just for non-payment of rent that would normally have happened over this moratorium period. The floodgates open on the 29th of March, which basically means, and that's not all that far away, and as at the 29th of March, the eviction orders can be served. Any eviction orders that would have been handed across over, well, since the implementation of the moratorium period, had to be deferred until the moratorium period finished, and that happens to be the 28th of March, which means evictions can be served as at the 29th of March.
Okay. And if people are going to be evicted and they potentially have outstanding or arrears of rent because of COVID,
yeah,
is the landlord or its managing agent entitled to lodge that missing payments to the register that's normally kept for tenants who actually haven't paid their bills? Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Absolutely, and so that's the incentive. I touched on that with TV before the start of the show. That's a not very well publicised. I don't think it's been very well publicised. I'm sure we'll see that step up over the next few weeks, so far as the state government providing that incentive to landlords that if the tenant has got an outstanding debt there, there is the use of some of that previously budgeted money which provides an incentive to the landlord to not terminate the lease and hence keep those tenants in the property.
Because potentially if it gets lodged that they're in arrears against their name, it would make it also difficult for them to find another property, let alone the shortage of rentals as well.
Yeah, that's right. Look, one thing that I'm going to speculate on something though, and this is 100% due to the lockdown that we've got now, irrespective of what happens next week, because next week, I don't think the floodgates, I don't think the green light's going to go back on. There'll be some sort of a staged process for us to come out of the current lockdown that we're in. And I think because of this hiccup, my speculation is that there might actually be some sort of a change to the current end date of the rental moratorium on evictions and rent increases. So that is 100% my speculation. But given the rental crisis that we know that we've currently got, and given this hiccup that we've got now, where those people that have to do something about their rental situation or find alternative rental accommodation right now, if they're unable to leave their houses, it's placing an unpredicted pressure on them, and would it be unfair then that because they'd have 1, 2, 3 weeks taken out of what they thought they had time frame wise to find an alternative rental, now that probably has been taken away from them, not because of their own fault, I dare say the state government would have some sort of a social obligation that they can't. I personally think that they'll probably look at shifting that moratorium date.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
But that is 100% speculation.
As I said, Oscar's speculation. Do you see my little print down below on the screen? Oscar's speculation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, take a screenshot of that, mate, and let's see where that finishes up in 5 or 6 weeks. Yeah, because
Hey, listen, I've got a little rant. I know we've had a few other things you wanted to tee on, but we'll definitely we're running out of time, and it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Dino. But we will, and we've covered some really good points. But the state election and the REWA reforms that they would like to see entertained, I think we'll bring that forward to. I'll take that now to next week's show, and we'll also mention about the essential businesses. Can you believe? You talk about the real estate fraternity, but there has been some toing and froing the last 24, 48 hours within the settlement conveyancing industry profession, because they're not classified as essential and yet were considered essential in the back in March of last year. And, of course, there's a lot of toing and froing because people are going, well, what happens now? Because people have got settlements, pre-settlement inspections, not allowed. And, of course, removalists are not considered essential workers. So when it comes to you talking about things of what's going to happen when the green light comes on, it'll be interesting to see what's going to go. And this is where special conditions that I have been saying for some time in contracts making reference to COVID, I think this just highlights as much as we think we'll be right, Jack, and we're living in WA, so we don't have to worry. this highlights how quickly the wheel can turn. And I think it highlights the importance of considering things of this nature when we provide or do special conditions on contracts. And I will discuss that more next week. But that's just that's TV's thoughts. And my rant.
Hey, before you do, mate, just on that, I just during the show I looked away and I when you were going to be talking about is settlement and conveyancing services, is that considered an essential service? I jumped into Google just to see if there was any business that had the name Essential Settlement and Conveyancing Services, because obviously they're going to need to change their name.
Yeah.
But no, I couldn't find that business. But I thought, well, surely there would have been one.
Yeah, well, we do say we're essential, providing essential advice. So there you go.
You're going to have to change that because you're not.
Yeah. No, we provide essential advice. I didn't say we're essential.
Well, I didn't see your essential advice in that list from Mark McGowan's Facebook post.
Okay. Anyway, I've got a rant.
Yep.
We do Property Avenue WA, okay? And we've been doing it for nearly 12 months now, and we're quite proud of it. And we've now got a podcast, I said to you. But here's an article that I picked up on, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. I'll have a read of this. Great Aussie Property Divide. What city median house price buys you across the country? So I thought, oh, well, I'll run through this and see how we fare in WA. So I get through the article, and number one it starts off with Sydney, which was to be expected. And then we go down the line a little bit, and it's Melbourne. And then we go down the line a little bit, and it's Brisbane. And then we go down a bit further, and it comes to Adelaide. And then we go down and we think, right, now we're getting close. Hobart. And then we go, and the article is finished. There is not one mention about WA, not one mention about Perth, not one mention about Karratha, Geraldton, Bunbury, Kalgoorlie, not a Skerrick. And guess what? That article is in realestate.com.au. Seriously? And people ask me why we do Property Avenue WA. You read these articles and you look at the headlines and go, oh, right. So as I keep on saying, read behind the scoreboard. And this just highlights what we've been on about. All the hoo-ha about real estate. And, mate, I tell you, unless you read the West Australian, unless you watch Property Avenue WA, the focus basically is on every other part of Australia. And the Tasmanians used to complain about the fact that they weren't part of Australia. Well, trust me, I think it's got to the point where WA definitely isn't part of Australia.
TV, calm down, mate. You're going red in the face, mate. I think you're getting a little bit too fired up about this.
That's my rant. So there you go.
It's actually true. I've actually seen similar positions taken on morning television programs or things at particular times of the day, and they go, we're going to talk to you about the property hotspots around Australia. And it includes every city except Perth or WA. It's like, we don't exist.
There's a very good reason why we do. This is not a money-making exercise. It's something that we're both passionate about, and lucky enough to have guests like yourself, Dino, who we really appreciate. But we try to focus on WA, and that is our focus. We try to get as much information as possible. We're certainly trying to get a few more guests with more varied areas in the world of property, not just real estate as such. And I've got a few guests lined up who we want to try to get on board. Now we've got a podcast that might extend that a little bit, but it just highlights the fact that if people are looking for information and read articles, trust me, they're not all. Very rarely are they telling us what we need to know here in WA. So that's my rant. I've got an if question. A very simple. If you could switch the sound of two animals, what two animals would they be?
I know what Dean's going to say.
What's that?
Well, surely it's going to be a zebra and something else.
No, I actually think it'd be quite amusing to change the sounds of a cat and a dog.
Ah, okay. Yeah, righto. Yep.
The cat sitting up on the fence, looking down and barking away. Woof woof woof.
Right. Yep. Okay.
Cat running around. So the dog's around. So yeah.
I just had to think of something on the spot because you didn't give me any preparation for this. But I reckon I changed the sound of the cow and the chicken. So we get the little chook just walking around going, "Moo, moo," and the cow with his big head's going to be sitting there going,
You idiot. You
He
idiot. Well, I've got my...
actually had the cow actually to be a rooster. The rooster would tell the cow in the morning that it's time to go and get milk, to just tell itself.
Oh.
it would just tell itself.
This is getting worse. I'll tell you what mine is. You want to hear what mine is? Mine's a cat
Yes.
and a lion. Imagine some little kid sitting there with a pussycat sitting on their lap, just purring away next to it, just roars. Well, then the poor old lion wouldn't be the king of the jungle, would they? Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey, listen,
I agree
guys,
with you, Dino. This is lockdown sending this old man crazy.
Might just send him bush.
Yeah. Well, I told the staff today that I went beaching today. I went to Shower Point for a swim this morning.
Where's that?
Shower Point.
Yeah.
It's in our ensuite.
All right.
I was going to say, probably Oscar and I can only get to probably Bibra Lake's the closest lake we could find with water in it, wouldn't it be, to have a swim?
Yeah. Hey, listen, we've been an hour, and been an absolute pleasure having you both. Dean, I really appreciate the short notice, but you're coming on board and providing information. It's always beneficial. And OD, well, we just enjoy doing what we're doing. But look forward to being next week. Don't forget, we're now available via podcast, and that podcast will be available tomorrow morning via Apple, and we will give you the subscription details if you look on our Facebook page and our Instagram page. Stay safe, and all those people out there, whatever it is that your challenges you've got ahead of you, we're thinking of you. And if anybody out there has got some thoughts about how we can help in some small way, we're open to suggestions. But take care, please, everybody. Those in lockdown, please take care. And we look forward to a more positive and constructive week next week. Take care, and see you again soon.